So thank you. And Rick, it's back to you to introduce our guest speaker, please.
Thank you. I'd like to introduce to you Tim Burrows. Tim is a retired vice president of 40 Creek Distillery. He is a graduate of the University of Toronto, where he obtained an honors degree in psychology, which obviously linked him to being the vice president of 40 Creek Distillery. Yeah, what else? And being a fellow graduate of psychology. I'm not going to ask if you're a Jungian, Freudian, or Adlerian, but we'll just skip all that. Anyway, Tim's owned and driven battery electric cars for the past 9 years, and he's logged over 300,000 kilometers without the need for gasoline or diesel fuel. He now enjoys sharing his electric vehicle experience with others, and he breaks down many of the myths and misconceptions about electric vehicle ownership. Tim is a member of the Electric Vehicle Society, a not-for-profit organization which works to promote the understanding and adoption of electric mobility in Canada. In his role there, he produces a monthly webinar called Canada Talks Electric Cars. Tim's going to talk to us about should your next car be electric? And I'm going to now introduce Tim and pass it on to Tim. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Rick, for the kind introduction, and thank you all for inviting me to come today and talk about, of course, one of my favorite subjects, which is electric cars and what is happening now in our world. I'm just going to get some of these things that I think are bothering you off the screen, if I can. There we go. So yeah, thanks again. This is a lot of fun for me, and I generally I've been doing these talks now for I think it's been a little over 4 years, 4.5 years, and how the conversation has shifted. It's amazing the questions and now the level of interest in electrification. And so when after I retired, I became involved with EV Society, and I've been really having a lot of fun with them, and then with my own thing here, which is something called Tim Talks Tesla and Electric Vehicles. And so here we are today, and I'll welcome your questions. I'm going to throw a lot of information. This is the Reader's Digest version of my talk. Fortunately, I had to pare it down a little bit for our time allotment today. So, you've been reading about it, and you probably are, being all business folks, you're quite aware of what's going on. The auto industry is being disrupted, and it's being disrupted on a scale that really we haven't seen since, I'm going to say, the turn of the century, when, by the way, electric cars were more popular than gas. And you sort of wonder, okay, what's causing this all to come together now? And I'm going to go through a few reasons. There are a lot of them, but here's the first one. And so you'll recognize this as a typical sort of combustion engine, a gas engine. And we've grown up with these things, over 200 moving parts. Curiously, though, they're not very efficient. Gas engines and diesel engines are able to really only take about 25% of the energy and the fuel that you put in the tank and put it to the wheels of the car to make it move. The rest of that 75% of that gas you bought at the corner station goes up in heat losses, mostly thermal losses, some other things too, but that's the primary reason. So really, despite the price we pay, we're not making good use of the fuel. And that's 400 horsepower. Now, there's another way to put 400 horsepower into a car, and it looks much like this. I have 2 of these in my current vehicle, and it's an electric motor. And of course, they only have one moving part, one. And the other great feature about electric motors is that they're incredibly efficient. Almost 90% of the energy, this time coming from the battery, of course, goes to the wheels to move it along. So they're very, very efficient. The next reason why the auto industry is getting about to get clobbered is really coming about because of what governments are doing around the world and here at home. And we're at a point now where over 30 countries in the world have published a schedule saying that after, it's different a little bit by country, but after a certain date, they'll no longer allow the sale of anything but new zero emission vehicles. So that's putting pressure on car manufacturers, of course. And it's interesting. They're doing it primarily for reasons surrounding climate change and their individual goals to reach targets there. But even in cities, we've been seeing around the world, cities taking action and saying, hey, you know what, if you want to come into our downtown core, it needs to be in a zero emission vehicle, or else you can't come, or you're going to pay a toll to get into the city. And that's being done, climate change and CO2 emissions perhaps, but also a very real problem with flat out plain pollution coming out of our tailpipes. And when you think about downtown Hamilton or downtown Toronto and all those gas vehicles buzzing around in a tight urban space, it's now been clearly demonstrated that, at least in Toronto, I think the number was about 260 people die every year as a direct result of emissions from light duty and private vehicles. And a lot more are made sick. They don't die, but they end up in hospital. So a lot of action, a lot of pressure on the automotive industry to make this switch. And then I'll give you one more reason why this is happening. And maybe it's sad to say, but regardless, probably this is the most compelling reason, and that is simple economics. Gas cars are expensive to own and drive and maintain. And electric cars aren't. Electric cars are expensive, more expensive at the moment to purchase, but not over the cost of ownership. If you compare comparable vehicles, gas to electric, if you keep your car for 3, maybe 4 years, you will absolutely make back the premium you paid to buy it. But that's not even going to last long. I think we're about 2 years away from price parity based on the costs, how quickly they're coming down. So all of these things and many more that I'm talking about are leading really towards the same outcome, which is the demise of the internal combustion engine. It's going the way of the dodo. And one of my confessions I always make in the talk is I use this particular graphic probably 24 times in my talks before I look closely at the letters on the diagram, which in fact spell kaput. So I need to pay more attention to my own material. So I was never a car guy, but when I got this is my second electric car you're looking at, my first one, I started showing up at car cruise events. And I know at least one of your members here would be really familiar with these, but probably you all know that in Ontario in the summertime, there are these wonderful events all over almost every night of the week, weather permitting, and you'll see sometimes hundreds of beautifully restored and interesting vehicles showing up in a farmer's field, and everybody brings their lawn chairs and some food. Rotary, I know, I go to one where Rotary looks after the food out in Baden, but people basically, it's a very social event. They all bring lawn chairs and food and sit around and, lie to each other and have a good time, show off their rides. And I showed up, and of course the first thing I hear is, well, what are you doing here? That looks like a brand new car. And I explained that, well, it isn't a restored car, but you also allow special interest cars, and this one's kind of interesting because it doesn't take any gas. And so, of course, at that stage, the questions start to flow, and they still are questions that people who own electric cars are asked all the time. The first one, logically, is, well, where do you charge the thing? We all know where the gas stations are, and it's quite interesting that people who own battery electric cars simply charge them at home, and they'll do that, I'm going to say, 90 to 95% of the time. You just never have to think about finding fuel anywhere else. It's very convenient. They always ask too, well, how long does it take to charge? Because I can go to a gas station and fill up in 10 minutes and I'm gone. What about electric? Well, if you think about the first question, if you're charging at home, that's where we leave our cars parked, or our cars are parked, probably, again, over 90%. I think the actual stat is 96% of the time our cars are not being used. They're actually kind of a crappy asset when you think about all we spend on them. And we only use them 4% of the time. So they're just parked there. So you don't really care how long it takes to charge 95% of the time because you're at home. But if you do go on a long trip, you want a faster charge. You're not going to want to have to sit there for 3 or 4 hours that it might take at home to charge. So on a fast charger, it can be 20 minutes, and now they're improving on that every single month. We're hearing about quicker charge times. The next question, which is also a logical one, I think, is people always ask me, well, what about the batteries on that car? You know, I'm sure, and they're correct, that the batteries are very expensive, the most expensive component of an electric car. And how long do they last? Because we've all had, right, laptops or other devices that work great and they recharge wonderfully for the first year or two, and then you notice that they're not really holding their capacity, and then you go to replace your battery pack in the computer, and the Best Buy tells you it costs more than a brand new computer, and you know the story. But the good news there is that with the technology now in battery design, that if you bought certainly a newer, in the last couple of years, a new electric car, you can expect between, I don't know, 300 maybe to 500,000 kilometers of life out of a car battery now, before you even have to think about it. And for the most part, that means the battery is already going to outlast the rest of the car, because the other parts of the car will wear out. And that's what we're finding. So it's good news there. So EVs, electric vehicles, are really just better than our traditional combustion. They're faster and quieter. They're very inexpensive to maintain. And when we talk about fuel, I don't know, I guess we're lucky in only one respect I can think of it, that we're not traveling so much. But if you're paying $1.40 for a liter of gasoline, the amount of energy that you're buying, if you compare the same energy and electricity, it's about 30 cents. So if you can find a gas station in the neighborhood that's got gas for sale at 30 cents a liter, you're as good as an electric car driver in terms of your fuel costs. Now, normally I do a poll on Zoom. I didn't have time to ask you to set it up at your end, so we'll just do it live time. I'm just curious, I won't call people out, but how many charging locations do you think, with this has been coming, how many charging locations do you think there are now in the province of Ontario? And I'm giving you 4 options. I'm going to let you pick one, and I'm not going to ask you to tell me out loud, but in your own mind, pick the one you think is probably about right. This is just Ontario, mind you. And now that you've got it, I'm going to give you the right answer. It's over 2.7 million places where you can charge an electric car in Ontario. Now, this is where you can't throw anything at me because I didn't come to your meeting in person. When I ask you to recall, where do we charge our electric cars 95% of the time?
At home.
That's at home, exactly. And so if that's where you refuel all the time, you need to count that as a fueling location, don't you? And I looked at StatsCan. In fact, we have in Ontario 2.7 million fully detached single-family homes. So we have to count those as charging locations, because as far as I know, they all have electricity and could charge a car. Now, that whopping big number doesn't count for purpose-built EV chargers, but nevertheless, we need to change. And I put this particular slide up just to get people thinking. We got to think a little bit differently, about our electric cars. It's not like it was. It's a new model. If you can charge at home, you got to count that as a charging location, and it's very convenient. By the way, there are 12,000 gas stations in Ontario, according to StatsCan. So I've explained that we refuel at home. And another thing people always say is, it's just such a pain. I don't want to have to deal with all the time involved with charging a car when I could just go fill up at the gas station. But you know what? It's actually a lot more convenient when you really live with one of these cars for any length of time. And so I put this up just to compare. And, we all have we've been all brought up, haven't we, with gas and maybe diesel cars. And there's a routine to refueling. You rarely are sitting in like the lazy boy at home and you say to your partner, hey, dear, I'm going to go and get gas. I'll be right back. It's not how we do it, is it? We're generally on our way somewhere or on our way home, and then we need to stop and refuel. So you're already inconveniencing yourself because you're going out of your way to go and refuel. And then there are all the little, and it takes a bit of time. Then there are all the other steps, aren't there? That just little routine things we do. We have to go through the process. Finally, we've paid, we've refueled, we get back in the car, we pull out, and we have to get back on whatever that route was that we were going. And that takes a bit of time. Clearly, as they say, your mileage will vary, but I'm going to say it's 9 minutes, and hope you agree that that's a reasonably fair guess that for a refill on your car. So what about this electric refueling business? Well, as I say, you don't have to go anywhere. So this is me coming home to my messy garage. And I was coming here anyway, so I haven't spent any time refueling at this point of my time refueling. And when I get out of the car, instead of turning right, I turn left. I grab a charging cable, press a button, which opens a little port on the car. I plug it in, and you know what? I'm done. I'm done. That's how much time I needed to essentially refuel, because the car is, like I said, sitting there all the time anyway. The next time I come out to use the vehicle, it's going to be full. And I timed that, by the way. It was a little under 10 seconds. And so now if you compare the amount of time you have to personally spend, it's about 8 hours a year. If you fill up once a week, you're spending about 8 hours a year of your time. If you're refueling at home, by the way, if you have an electric car, pretty much they all say, just plug it in. You don't have to worry about it. Just plug it in when it's not being used. And you'll be fine. If you do that every day, it's about 1 hour of your time. So 8 hours versus 1 hour. But that's not even really where the convenience, in my experience. I've had 7 winters with electric car. We live in this beautiful country, and when at least 3 months of the year, when you're out there refilling your car, you look something like this poor guy, right? It's not always a pleasant experience standing there for all that time. And I don't have to do that. I'm already home comfortable, and I'm only out there for a couple seconds prepping. And so while you're still out there filling your gas tank, I'm already inside, right? And realizing that I have red nail polish, which I need to do something. I need a different picture for that. I don't wear red nail polish. It's a different shade, but you get the idea. It's a very convenient to live with. It's really great, really great. Long road trips. So charging at home is one thing. It may take, in fact, a few hours, but you don't care because you're already redoing your nail polish. But if you want to go on a long trip, you don't want to have to wait. And fortunately, there are fast chargers now and networks of really fast car chargers that are being deployed right across the country. You can drive now on Petro-Canada, for example, has built a fast charging network coast to coast. Canadian Tire is almost done. They're doing the same thing. Electrify America, as they brand themselves here, Electrify Canada, which is actually Volkswagen, which is a whole other story. But they have built their own great fast charging network right across the country. And of course, Tesla only set out to build electric cars, and they knew we'd want to go distances. They, in fact, built their own charging network right through North America and the rest of the world. And these are the chargers. All of these chargers on this page will charge a car relatively quickly. And we're seeing those times even improve, as I say, almost monthly now. We're getting faster. The newer batteries can take a faster charge, and the chargers out in the wild are higher power to deliver that energy. So this is what the Tesla network looks like. I didn't give myself an out at the beginning to say, I do not work for Tesla. I have no skin in the game. I am an admitted Tesla fan, but you don't need a Tesla. There are a lot of great electric cars here and coming at a rapid pace. But Tesla led the way on many things, and this is an example. So this is their charging network. And if you zeroed in on one of these, if you've never seen one, they look something like this. This particular, they call them superchargers in the Tesla network. This particular supercharger, I think I counted 16 bays. So 16 Teslas could pull up at once and get a charge. It's all done wirelessly and over the internet, so you don't have to take out your wallet here, and nobody needs to help you. Just back in and pull. And they're always located, near amenities, so you can go get a coffee, use washroom, go shopping. Many locations have something to eat. So they're very, very well placed. But I don't want to leave you with the notion that these sorts of giant chargers are the only places you can charge. You can charge an electric car from a common household plug, and I've done it many times. I go to a cottage and then run a cord through the bedroom window, and I'll charge my car there. It does take on the order of days and nights of being plugged in to get a charge on it if you have a big battery in your car, but you could do it. I recommend at least the next one, which is basically a plug that you'd use for an electric stove or a dryer, and they're cheap. And then you can get a home EV plug charger, which I have. The fast charger on the right of the screen is really just for long distance traveling. They're expensive. They're like $100,000. You're not going to want one of those, and nor do you need one ever at home. The next thing I want to talk about just quickly is the connectivity of the cars. Interesting, again, Tesla way ahead of everybody else, and they've brought the whole industry along. Every car they've ever built comes with a wireless connection to the internet that's always on. You can turn it off, by the way, but rarely would you want to. And so they're always connected to the internet, and you sort of say, well, that's great. What's that about? What good is that for me? And here are some of the reasons. It's really a great idea. So firstly, you can get improvements, and they just beam them out to your car. I'll get a message, just like you get it probably on your phone or computer, says something along the lines of, new software update available. Do you want to you want to install it now? Or you can just spin a little dial and say, no, do it at 2 a.m. I won't be using the car. Do it then. And so you get these updates, and the car actually gets better and better. My first car was a 2013 Tesla Model S. And when I sold it 4.5 years later, it was a different vehicle. It was amazing. It had been given so many new capabilities and improvements over that time. So it's a wonderful feature. The next reason for that connectivity that is very helpful is that now the car knows the location of all the chargers and their status. So if I say, and I've done this, I live in Carlisle, so I'm not far from you folks. I drove to, back when you could go somewhere, I went to Florida. I went to Disney with my wife, and the car knows. I just sit in my driveway and say, take me to Orlando. And on the big navigation screen inside the car, it maps it all out and takes me all the way using the chargers. It knows where they are, and it tells me in my driveway how long I'll need to charge at each location, how many kilometers it is, how long it'll take for the charging and the drive in between the chargers. And it even tells me their status. So, if a charging station was down because, I don't know, an ice storm or something, I could see that and the car would plan around it. So I don't even have to think about it. It's pretty amazing. And it tells me how many other cars are there charging in real time at all the chargers on the way to Florida. With this connectivity, this over-the-air thing, of course, like everything in the world now, you need to have an app on your phone. And you can preheat the car and cool it, which is nice, not a big deal. Everybody can do that with new cars now. But you can track it, right? And so I'll tell you a story, but don't judge me harshly. My wife used to borrow my car, and I'd be at home and she'd be out in my Tesla shopping. And if I wanted to, I could take out my cell phone and open up the Tesla app, and I could see a little Google map and my car on the map. And I can see it moving down the road, exactly where she's going in my car. And it has a little bubble beside it telling me, how fast she's driving in real time. So, and I know that sounds creepy, but my wife's very clever. About a week after we got our first Tesla, she came into the room with her phone held above her head, said, look, dear, I put that app on my phone too. So I can't get away with anything. You get the gist. But actually, it's a really, really helpful thing. If your car's ever stolen and you leave your fob in the car and someone steals your car, you can just call, and this has happened. People call the police and say, hey, my car's on the 403 going westbound, go get it. And the other thing I can do is I can summon my car now with this car. It's crazy. I could be out in a parking lot, I should say. I could be out in the parking lot at a mall, and when I come out of the mall, it's pouring rain. I can stand at the door of the mall and press the button, and the car will come wherever it is. It'll navigate through the parking lot. It'll turn its signals on, whatever it needs to do to come and get me at the door. It's wild. And soon there'll be an update through this over-the-air business that will let the car drive pretty much without any input from me.
Wow.
So self-driving cars, there's still some issues to work out. It's a complicated issue, but I can tell you that the race is on. It's coming. All of the major car companies are hard at work to be the first ones to deliver it. And every Tesla ever built, really since October, well, I should say since October of 2016, every one was built with 8 high-definition cameras built into it, 12 long-distance ultrasonic sensors to sort of picture the environment, long-distance forward-facing radar, which interestingly he's not going to probably use long-term, and a computer in the car to take all the data from these sensors and make sense out of it and let the car drive. So the main thing that people are waiting for, there are 2 things at this stage. One is the software programs are being written now, and they're using real learning from existing cars that have these sensors to improve the software to drive the car on its own. And then, of course, we need lots of regulations in place because, like the little comic here says, imagine 2 driverless cars colliding on the highway. Who do you go after to sue? So there are lots of issues and things to think about. But autonomous cars are, I do a talk. If you ever get bored and you need someone else to come back and do a talk, I do it. I have a talk I've prepared on autonomous cars and how they're going to change society. The biggest change, I think, in my opinion anyway, that there'll be fewer traffic deaths. Looking at the US numbers, over 40,000 people die. That's not counting, terrible injuries, disabilities coming out of accidents. 40,000 people die every year in car accidents. And all of the research points to the fact that, again, that 90-something percent of those accidents are human caused. It's not that the wheel fell off your car and it went off the road and hit a tree. It was more likely somebody was distracted or tired or, heaven forbid, impaired, but it's human causes. So if self-driving cars can reduce those numbers even by 50%, that's a huge savings of life and valuable in that respect only. Think about this one. A child born today, I say might never learn to drive a car, but in all likelihood will never learn to drive a car. I expect for some time to come, it'll be an option. But I also expect the insurance companies will have the statistics to show that the car is far safer risk than the human. So if you choose to drive your own car, go ahead and do it, but your insurance rates are going to be through the roof compared to you allowing the car to do it. And I think the numbers will bear that out. So I started out with the question, why, should your next car be electric? And I'm going to try and summarize why I think it absolutely should. First of all, and I didn't dwell on this, but if any of you, and I didn't ask, maybe some of you in the room already drive a fully electric car, but they are a lot of fun. It's a new experience. And if nothing else, go to a Tesla shop or someplace that sells electric cars and test drive one. You'll be amazed. It's a totally different driving experience. You should get an electric car because, living with them is really convenient. Maintenance is next to nothing. It's tires is the big thing. You don't have oil changes. You don't have to, it's really nice. And refueling at home, I can't tell you what a pleasure that is compared to going to a gas station. Electric cars actually, as you see, can get better over time. Not every car manufacturer yet has over-the-air improvements, but most of the new ones do. So they can get better over time. I don't know how your car is making out, but it's neat to get those improvements. inexpensive fuel. Kind of weird to think that electricity is inexpensive in our province, but in fact, compared to gasoline, it's really cheap, as you saw. And electric cars require very little maintenance, and they last a very long time. That's proving to be the case. And finally, our planet really is in trouble. It really is. Over 25% of the greenhouse gases that are responsible for the climate change we're experiencing come from passenger vehicles and light duty trucks, like light duty vehicles. So over 25%. So this is low hanging fruit in the battle against climate change. And that's another reason, of course, why you're seeing such a big movement in this direction. And it's easy. You know what? And I say this with all sincerity, if electric cars weren't better for the environment, if they were the same as gas, I would still be doing these talks simply on the basis that, you got to drive an electric car and live with one for a little bit. You're going to be amazed at how great it is. The fact that it's actually a major part of the solution to our climate concerns is a bonus. That's the cherry on top, really.
Once upon a time, before you girls were born, no one had cell phones, and families had to share a single phone.
You mean like Mom could read my texts?
There was no texting. It was a landline.
Ew, gross.
What about selfies?
Well, you could take a selfie, but then you had to get it developed.
No!
It could take days. And scariest of all, instead of electric cars, we used to fill up our vehicles with gas that was made from animals that had been dead for millions of years and burned it to drive around.
Nice try, Dad.
That's not scary. That's just stupid.
And that's it. That's probably all of my time. I'd be happy to take any questions if you have. I'll stop my screen share here.
Yeah. I have a question.
Sure.
I think Norway has the largest amount of EVs per capita in the world, but the government, even though they make a hell of a lot of money on their offshore oil, the government is really involved in subsidizing the cost of the cars. We're not going to have a heavy penetration until our government gets on board with that sort of thing.
We won't have it quickly, as quickly, Jim, as if there were some decent incentives in place, but it will happen regardless. I mean, for the reasons I mentioned, why would you ever go out and buy a gas car that is so expensive to operate and is crappy to drive? I mean, I think the incentives are quite valid if you believe in that climate change is an existential threat and that we need to do something about it and that we can't wait, and it'll speed up the technology. And I think it's fair to say that as over the next couple of years, as the prices and the costs of electric vehicles continues to plummet, that those incentives will dry up and go away because they just simply won't be needed for the accelerating the pace of adoption of electric vehicles. So yeah, you're right. Right now and up until now, those incentives have been really invaluable in accelerating adoption, and Norway is a fine example. Prior to our current provincial government, we had a pretty healthy rebate in place in Ontario. Mm-hmm. I actually, both of the cars, I've had 2 electric cars, and both of them I benefited from those incentives. And Ontario took them away, but Quebec and BC have left, they had their own very generous incentives, and they're still in place. And lo and behold, guess which provinces in Canada are way miles ahead in EV adoption? It's Quebec and BC. So yeah, your point's well taken.
Tim, that was a fascinating presentation. I learned a lot. I just wonder if you could just tell me, I'm always curious, like when I occasionally go to the mall and I see those charging stations, what's the cost to charge your vehicle at, not at your home, at another charging station?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And in that regard, the charging infrastructure it's really all new stuff, right? This is all very new. And what we're seeing is a number of companies out there vying for to compete in the EV charging space. And so different manufacturers and suppliers now have charging out in the wild, and they're all trying to find their footing on cost and pricing. So it is all over the map. It tends to be more expensive, will always be more expensive to charge outside of your home. In the case of Tesla, it's cheaper than gas, but it's certainly way more expensive than if you charge your car at home. So if you think about parking, most of us accept the fact if we go somewhere, we're going to have to pay money to park our cars in a lot of places. And we don't really object to that. No one likes it, but everybody accepts that as being the way it is. And I think for external charging, people want to make money offering it. And so we're going to have to pay more there. It tends to be, some are ridiculously high. And my belief is that nobody's going to use them. And that's been the experience for some of those early charging installations. They're not getting used and they're throwing, well, see, no, it's not going to work, And so, well, it's because you're charging, 3 times the cost of gas, and I can fill at home for 25% of the cost of gas. So why would I come to you unless I'm desperate? So, and being desperate, these cars, if you buy an electric car in Ontario, in our part of the world, my recommendation is look for one. I think 400 kilometers and more of battery range is what you need, because we have cold winters and cold affects your range. So if we have over 400 kilometers of full battery range, think about your own personal driving. How often do you get in your car and drive 400 kilometers before you're parking it again for the night? Very rare, right? Maybe on a long holiday trip or something, which none of us are really doing much of. But even in normal times, it's pretty rare. So you're going to charge at home all the time, or 95% of the time, and you're only going to have to pay a premium to charge elsewhere 5% of the time.
All right. Great.
Hey, Tim, I think you've piqued a lot of curiosity here this morning, and I'm sure the EV community is pretty huge. What do you suggest if we want to jump on and kind of, maybe with social media or what? How do you suggest that we?
Honestly, the best thing for someone who wants to learn about this and dive into the community is this EV society that I belong to. It's an, as I in the intro, not for profit. It's just think of it as a car club, but for electric cars. But we do have that kind of mission where we want to lobby government and we help the general public understand the benefits and how to use these cars. So join the EV Society. You can join for free as what we call an associate member, and you get most of the benefits of that. We have a monthly meeting, and I take turns chairing one of the monthly meetings, and we usually get 50, 60 people out. It's always the third Wednesday of the month, and sit in and you can ask questions. The room is about, I'd say 75%. They're all experienced EV owners, and the other people are like you might be initially coming in to kind of kick the tires and hear what it's about and ask questions of people who've been driving these cars for a while. If you want to become a full member, which would be really helpful, it's $30 a year. Like, it's not going to break the bank. And if you've got my hair color, you can get an annual membership for $20 a year. And there are some benefits. You can get deals at Cal Tire on your winter tires, and there's some sort of little member perks that we been able to negotiate with suppliers. So EV, and the website to go to join, it's evsociety.ca, evsociety.ca. The other thing I'll suggest is if you want a really great impartial resource, there's an organization called, it's really Plug and Drive is the name of the organization, but they operate a facility. It's not convenient for us. It's in top of Toronto, called Electric Vehicle Discovery Center. And at this place, this is really cool. This is an ex hydro person, actually a lawyer on their environmental front, who planted the idea for the Discovery Center, and Kara Clareman is her name. And so she's founded this thing. She gets electric cars from all different dealerships that want to promote their EVs, and she has them at the facility. And you can make an appointment and you can go and test drive them. They don't sell them there. There's zero pressure, and they have really well-informed staff. They're all volunteers, and they'll answer your questions. And it's a great place to go and learn and test drive some cars if you don't want the feeling that maybe someone's going to push a sale on you. So yeah, there are a number of places, but evsociety.ca, join and click. We haven't caught up with COVID in one regard. We have chapters all over Ontario of EV Society. The idea being that we want our communities to want these our members to have a community that they can lobby local government and gather people locally. But with COVID, we've combined those and invited all the chapters to meet on the third Wednesday. So when you sign up, if you sign up for EV Society membership, tick off Mississauga, because that's my chapter. And then, and that would actually, you could either do Mississauga, and then I'll get to see you more. The last thing, can I say one last plug, and that is for my webinar, which I do on behalf of EV Society. Again, this is all volunteer stuff. And it's always the first Tuesday of every month. I just did one, which was awesome. It was the best one yet. I always bring an expert in the field. I had a fellow you may or may not know, Dr. Jeff Dahn, D-A-H-N. He is at Dalhousie University, and this guy is world renowned for his battery research. He is world renowned, and I almost broke Zoom. I have a 1,000-person limit on the Zoom webinar platform, and we hit 987 on Tuesday night. So, and people from all over the world. We had like 200 people from the United States, people from Great Britain, Thailand, all over the place. It was really cool. So that's a great place to learn too.
Terrific. Thank you, Paul, Tim. And Paul has put the links to Tim Talks Tesla and to the EV Society in our chat as well. So thank you
Can I
so
ask
much.
2 quick questions?
Really quick, yes.
Really quick, okay. The 30 countries that are listed, are India and Russia on board for this, and the natural resources that make these batteries? I hear a lot of negatives about that situation. Is that getting better or what?
Yeah, first question, I don't think India or Russia have set that timetable. I don't think they have anything. We know that India is doing it. I don't know what Russia's doing, but India is moving in that direction big time. In terms of, so nothing we do comes without some environmental footprint, and certainly EVs, where they have their issue is on the mining side of those materials that are needed for the batteries. Dr. Don, who just was on, went on to explain that they've basically, the one thing that's a big concern is cobalt, which comes from the Republic of Congo, that have terrible labor practices. And so everybody's trying to get rid of cobalt from their battery chemistry. And that's happening. I mean, it's not 100%, but it's getting there. So yeah, we are in the best position. We have everything in our country to take this industry by storm. We have all the raw materials, the talent, and so on. So yeah, we're in a good spot in that regard.
Hey Tim, on behalf of our club, I got to tell you, your knowledge and your passion for the EV world is made for a riveting presentation. Really enjoyed it. And thank you for dispelling some of the myths that I know I had. And you know what? I think we'd love to have you back to talk about autonomous vehicles. That's just a fascinating area to talk about. So you may know that Rotary has an initiative across the world to eradicate the world of polio. So in your honor, for thanking you to coming out this morning, we're going to be eradicating 40 children on your behalf.
You mean
So thanks for
vaccinating?
coming out.
Vaccinating.
Yeah, don't
What did
get
I
rid of
say?
the, don't get rid of the children on my account.
What did I say?
You said
Vaccinated.
erratic, yeah, we're
Oh,
vaccinating.
eradicate. Oh my
40
gosh.
children.
Yes.
That's okay.
Thanks, Tim.
My pleasure.
coming out.
Thank you. Thank you again. I really enjoyed it and appreciate all that you do.